Hey, welcome to the Infinite Unlimited, surveying the frontiers of metahuman multiverses, just a couple months behind. I'm Paul, and speaking of a couple months behind, it's been a couple years since I've been back here in the comics syllabus hosting seat, but here I am, for reasons we'll get into later on, giving this a shot. So, here on Infinite Unlimited, we talk about books released this week on Marvel Unlimited on DC Universe Infinite Ultra. So, starting off with new books from Marvel this week. Released Monday, November 24th. Hope you all had a good week here in the US. We had the Thanksgiving holiday. But these books were originally released in August, and the first one that caught my eye is Black Cat #1. Black Cat is from the creative team of G. Willow Wilson and Gleb Melnikov, and been a lot of changes in Spider-Man world. Not too sure what they are, to be honest with you, but with them come a reboot of Black Cat, a character who recent run in the last couple of years, written by Jed MacKay, really breathed new life into this character, and now the cat burglar, thief, Felicia Hardy, sometime villain, sometime ally, is now in this particular story, realizing that what the world needs, what the city needs right now, given some changes in Spidey's life, is another superhero, someone to do battle with the criminals. And so she's got to get over her own criminal past and temptations and turn a new leaf. I'm always interested in anything written by G. Willow Wilson, and it's been a little while since I've read some Gleb Melnikov art, but I'm intrigued, and this first issue had enough to keep me reading and to see what new things Black Cat might bring. Also this week is all new Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider #1, which is how they figured out how to name this character, I suppose. I think it's worth clarifying the naming for Spider-Gwen or Ghost Spider, Spider-Ghost, or whoever it is, because Gwen is now in the 616 universe officially by some multiversal shenanigans that I did not read. But there you go. Written by Stephanie Phillips with art by Paolo Villanelli. Quite good looking art, new costume design, and now that Gwen and Father Captain Stacy are in the 616 universe, Gwen's got a new costume, Gwen's got to find a new band, and whole new enemies and threats. It's interesting. I'm so interested in Spider-Gwen, a cool character, a cool design when she first debuted, but especially now that Into the Spider-Verse and all those Spidey cartoons have made Gwen such a prominent character for kids, like she's always been there. I just love how quickly this character has risen into the popularity and prominence through games and video games and kids stuff. So I'm really interested in how the comics makers, trying to be cutting edge with this character, are doing interesting and new things with Gwen. So I'll be following that and reading that. The third Marvel book out of the 4 from this week is the 3rd issue of Imperial. Now, I'll be raw honest with y'all. Anytime Jonathan Hickman writes something, I'm interested. And most of the time, I have no idea what's going on. Still the case here, as Hickman attempts to, utterly shift the chess pieces and maybe write a whole new chess game with new chess rules for the the cosmic end of the Marvel universe. But whatever's going on between the Kree and the Skrull and the Inhumans and the Wakandans, whatever is happening in this cosmic war, I will be interested to see if I can make any sense of it. I believe this is the 3rd of a 4-issue miniseries. And, when Hickman launched House of X and Powers of X and the Krakoa era of X-Men, I similarly read, very intrigued, not really understanding what's happening, but could see the payoffs. Some of it not so great, but the Krakoa era, I think, at least brought a lot of fresh ideas to the X books. And I'm be interested in what Imperial does with this, I was going to say corner of the Marvel universe, but really when we talk about cosmic Marvel, it's not just a corner of the universe. It really is the universe. But what Hickman brings to rethinking these ideas, and particularly when you're involving the Wakandans and you're involving these galaxies and empires, how it maybe speaks to the kinds of global conflicts and imperial ideas that are around our culture, and that science fiction and speculative um, stories can make us think about. So maybe I'll talk about Imperial when it all wraps up, when I'm able to read it for the fourth time and a bunch of online commentary and make some sense about what the heck is going on. But the fourth book is really this week's Marvel of the Week, and it's Exceptional X-Men number 12. And in the time that I have not been doing this podcast, I have read and thought often about talking about Exceptional X-Men here at the Comic Syllabus. Granted, I am biased. Eve Ewing is one of my favorite writers in comics right now. The biases come from the fact that in my other life as an educator and educational researcher, Eve Ewing is a no insignificant figure, a really, really important scholar and thinker, one-time middle school teacher herself, landmark books about schools and equity, such as Ghosts in the Schoolyard, or more recently, Original Sins, which if you have any interest in schools or history or race, I do recommend Eve Ewing's book, Original Sins. But I also recommend, since you're here listening to a comics podcast, Eve Ewing's comics work. And really one of the best, in my estimation, one of the best Marvel writers going right now. But what Eve Ewing has done in Exceptional X-Men is, to me, what makes X-Men books exceptional. I can hang with some Jonathan Hickman, like, multiverse altering meta stories that are vast and societal. But I think my favorite version of X-Men stories are the ones that have that bit of Claremont soap opera stuff, but really hone in on the idea of young adolescent coming of age, people discovering that what they may feel internally as a set of amazing, remarkable, maybe even horrifying superpowers is hated and feared by a world that doesn't understand them. And I think that as the analog for what it is to be part of a marginalized community, or to have an identity that people are threatened by in the world, by that dominant culture is threatened by, has always been the X-Men metaphor par excellence. And what makes Exceptional X-Men such a wonderful throwback and also something new is that Ewing is able to talk about these three new characters, Axo, like an axolotl, and Bronze, and what's the name of the third one? I really liked them, but I forgot their names. Oh, there they are, Melee, or Trista, Tao, and Alex, as characters who are, you could tell Eve Ewing hangs around and has knows young people today, not just from the internet, but sort of their real lives and their complexities and their strong, moral stances and the things that they're passionate and care about. They're reflected in these characters who are complex and wonderful, and I've just fallen in love with them and love the idea that in this series they're being schooled, they're being trained, they're being mentored by Kate Pryde, Kitty, Kitty again, who is to me one of the original, X-Men teens, and one of the original X-Men teens being mentored by the original X-Men teens, and all of the best things of that New Mutant era, or that New Mutants era, or that Generation X era, showing up in this book, but also tackling things that I think very present day. And we have been in a storyline, just to spoil a little bit of the previous issues, if you haven't read this, well worth catching up on, storylines that involve Mr. Sinister and questions about genetics. And it reminds me of Ewing's work in her book Original Sins about the roles of eugenics and ideas about, your genetic inheritance being part of your value, or how the world calculates your value, and so on, really reflected in that last storyline. And in this one, you have our young heroes, our three new heroes, um, going back in time to try to save their teacher, Kitty, and finding a 13-year-old Kitty in Deerfield, Illinois, right? In that Illinois area that is familiar to Ewing. There's a little Ironheart in there. Of course, Emma Frost and Bobby Drake are also mentors in this gang, so they're involved as well. It's good storytelling. The whole run has been great storytelling. I think after issue 13, this book um, gets subsumed into whatever the age of apocalypse or revelation or something crossover that's going on right now. But 3 months ago, at least, we were getting to a pretty peak place in this run. So must recommend not only this issue, but really the whole run by Eve Ewing. It's one of my favorite Marvel books going right now. And truly an example of what makes X-Men books so exceptional in the way that they reflect on life for young people right now, and how when you discover these powers and what responsibility comes with them as adolescents, and what you owe to each other, that's truly the schooling that we most need. Exceptional X-Men, a huge boost for Marvel in a time when, if I'm honest, Marvel has not been as has been not been hitting as much as DC has. And so to turn the page to the books released on DC Universe Infinite Ultra, DC Universe Infinite Ultra, right? And just for clarification, that is the ultra level tier, ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite membership. Hey, listen, Marvel Unlimited was a great deal. DC Universe Infinite was also a great deal, but once it became Ultra and all the books are 1 month behind, it's just too tempting not to. So if you're not an Ultra subscriber, you're gonna have to go back 6 months. If you're an Ultra subscriber, you're just going back 1 month. Or for some of the titles, no months, because DC KO #2, which was out this past week in print, is also out already for DC Universe Infinite Ultra subscribers. And so that is one of the picks of this week, along with Absolute Batman Annual #1, which is something I'll talk about later on. So I'm going to hold off on that one. But the DC KO #2 continues this big crossover event that's been going on. It is written by Joshua Williamson and Scott Snyder, and it is drawn by Sermonico and Javi Fernandez. And it's really this tournament, of 32 heroes and villains who are video game style or NCAA tournament style in this bracket competition to become champion, accumulate a bunch of artifacts to ultimately be able to compete, perhaps, with Darkseid because of some kind of big story shenanigans that I don't know that I understand. Anyway, it's all a premise for massive fight tournament, which I think DC, this whole all-in era, one of its successes has been to embrace what is fun and then to sort of try to drop in some meaning within that fun. And DC KO is very much representing that vein right now. So we're just having a good time with the massive fight tournament. I won't give too much away on that. I'll just invite you to let me know, weigh in the comments on how that event is working for you. Weigh in the comments. I don't know where this is posted, where you can make comments. But in addition to DC KO #2, this week I also read Superman Red and Blue 2025 special #1. So Superman Red and Blue is kind of like the Batman Black and White anthology short stories series. And this one is a special one because I think they already completed the run of that. But there's 4 stories here by multiple creative teams doing fun things with Superman. And I think the variety of artists on this really show the different ways that the interpretation of just using red and blue along with black and white can be done in very different artistic ways. It's really interesting to me, visually speaking. But here we have 4 stories, one written by Paul Dini and Mirka Andolfo, that really sees Superman trying to bail out Supergirl in a version of Supergirl, and by the way, a version of Krypto, really reminiscent of the recent James Gunn movie, and also the Tom King Supergirl storyline, and so fun vibes for that, and the way that they are bond as cousins. They really had to look out for each other. And with Paul Dini at the pen, Mirka Andolfo's really playful style does the job really well. A standout story is one called All the Time in the World, that is written and drawn by Michael Walsh. Always fun to see Michael Walsh drawing Michael Walsh, and it takes heavily. It's very similar to that first issue of Astro City, if if you know that one. The Kurt Busiek and Brent Anderson first issue with Samaritan, and the day in the life, the exhausting life where, you're running and chasing all the things you have to as a hero, and trying to maintain your secret identity and trying to maintain your relationship with your wife, Lois, and your kid. But disaster is calling out to you from all over the place, and you got to go attend to it. And it's really what it feels like to be a person in a busy job, or in trying to help and take care of lots of people. It's what Superman does. That's what he is. And so it's a nice condensed version of that kind of story. Yeah, it's a good one. And then there's a couple more stories. One by Dan Abnett and Caitlin Yarsky, and another one by Rainbow Rowell, which is a treasure every time we get Rainbow Rowell writing, DC and Marvel comics. But that story written by Rainbow Rowell and illustrated by Cyan Tormey. A couple of good pieces of anthology comics. If you like Superman, especially, I think a vibe of Superman that this year we're really celebrating with the movie and the anniversary and all that kind of stuff. I think this is a nice condensed packet of it for you. One that I actually bought in its paper prestige format, paper cardstock version a month back. But the last book from this week is actually the one that is going to be our world's finest, our this week's finest, and it's Batman and Robin Year One, number 12. This is the final issue of this maxi series, written by Mark Waid, drawn by Chris Samnee, co-plotted as well by Chris Samnee, with colors by Matt Lopez and Mateus Lopez, and letters by Clayton Coles. I think that this series has been one of my one of comics' saving graces for the past year, because the Waid and Samnee team, who know how to bring playfulness, vitality, vibrancy, even to some of what would be the darker moments. There is a recapturing of the noirish elements, but also a lot of tributes to, the kind of animated series, Art Deco vibe, as well as the Batman 60s TV show, the Bob Kane Finger era Batman, all kinds of tributes, a lot of the classics, and also a very classic sense, with this being a year one story, of the relationship dynamics between a more juvenile Dick Grayson, one still sorting out his feelings. He hasn't matured into the Nightwing, or even the older Dick Grayson, the responsible Dick Grayson that we know. He's still working out his grief. And there have been some poignant moments with that in this series. And a relationship between Batman and Robin where, thankfully, we've just seen this all too rarely, so much so that I realize when I see it, how much I miss it and how much it's familiar to me from reading Batman of old, but has not lived much in recent versions of their relationship, whether between Dick and Bruce, or Bruce and, one of the other ones, Tim or Damian or whatever, which is just a Batman who flat out enjoys this kid. Yes, there's plenty of how irresponsible to send a kid out in bright colored circus costume to fight criminals and, fly through the air. Acrobat or not, and plenty of the adoption agency inspections to point out the absolute irresponsibility of what Batman is doing with his ward. But but you know, Batman itself is this fantasy fulfillment, wish fulfillment. And as far as revenge fantasies go, which tons of legends and mythology and fiction and storytelling is built on these revenge fantasies. Uh, it's part of our human nature, and Batman has always been a place where it can go very dark or it can be um, hopeful and lighthearted. And I love that Wade and Somni lean into the latter, including in how Robin gets included. So this is really the culmination of that 12 issue story. It's a satisfying ending. If you haven't read it, I won't give it away. But now that it's all there, all 12 issues on DC Universe Infinite Ultra, I gotta highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't caught up on it or hasn't read it. Um, Maybe my favorite comic of the last year when it comes to these DC and Marvel comics, and definitely worth reading. So that is this week's finest. Now, what we do every week, and I've buried this lead, is we take the books, the latest books on Marvel Unlimited and the latest books on DC Universe Infinite, and we put them in a head-to-head matchup. We compare the favorites, and if I had to put eXceptional X-Men number 12 up against Batman and Robin Year One, number 12, it'd be hard for me to say which one I like more. So we always got to go to a tiebreaker. And this week, that tiebreaker, the wild card for the win, is Absolute Batman Annual number 1, which makes DC Universe Infinite this week's winner. Um, Sorry, Marvel. Maybe next week. But the creative team behind Absolute Batman number 1, there's a longer main story, a couple of backups. So the main story is a Daniel Warren Johnson joint. Sometimes these annuals are a bit of a throwaway story. Here they really packed a punch for this first Absolute annual, and it is the Absolute Universe version of Batman very fully. It's also very much a Daniel Warren Johnson type of story, and if you've read any of Johnson's work, you're gonna feel both the artistic and the storytelling, the very kind of emotional, sentimental, moral type of, some people would say very black and white stance, but that's maybe part of its strength. Is that Daniel Warren Johnson has a certain moral clarity to his work that I can appreciate. Colors by Mike Spicer, letters by Clayton Coles, and then the other stories, you could say the backup, the shorter stories are one by James Herron, colors by Dave Stewart, and another by Meredith McLaren. So a lot of cartoonists doing cartoonists' work, and Herron and McLaren are both not only creators whose names rhyme, but creators whose work I appreciate a lot. But I got to say that it is the Daniel Warren Johnson story in this that's depicted on the cover that really makes this a winner for me. The setup, almost crafted to appeal just to me, reminds us that in this universe, in the Absolute Universe, Bruce's father is a teacher and not a wealthy man. Thomas Wayne is a humble teacher, and reads in the newspaper about extremists, racist extremists who are committing acts of violence. And a young Bruce who is just asking, what can we do about this? What do we do about this? And the idea of Thomas Wayne, instead of being a millionaire, being a humble do-gooder teacher, is something that plays in, again, to the moral equation of what Johnson is doing in this book, and comes back later on in the story. But what happens ultimately is that a grown-up Bruce Wayne decides that his version of taking action, different from his father's in the classroom or, in society, becomes this, I don't know what else to call it. It's very Django and Unchained. It's very, set fire to the racists and Nazis. and commit some pretty brutal violence. There is some pretty brutal violence on these pages, as a kind of retribution to the brutal racists who are depicted in this story. And I think there's reasons for someone to feel some reservation about this kind of story. And for me, as a teacher and as somebody who is invested in nonviolence, I always have reservations about all the stuff that we read, which is very, very ensconced in notions and very almost reptilian ideas about like the roles of violence and how violence, purports to satisfy or to create some kind of retributive balance of power, bring about a kind of justice, which these are all words that we should put asterisks on. And I think that this story does as well, even as it engages, participates in that kind of storytelling in some pretty gratuitous, violent scenes. But Batman himself questions himself and this path that he's chosen and the kind of violent retribution that he's engaged in. And for that, for all those questions, I think it's super interesting. And, you know, Johnson's sentimentalist, almost romantic gothic type of art and storytelling does its thing. So if that's something you enjoy, and I got to be honest, I don't always, but I often do enjoy, especially when succinctly and concisely told in this kind of moralistic fable. It's interesting. So Batman Annual, Absolute Batman Annual 2025, #1, some jumble of those title pieces is what you're looking for, and it's there for you on DC Universe Unlimited. DC Universe, no, not Unlimited. DC Universe Infinite Ultra. All right, poking fun a little bit. The last thing that I'll name because DC wins this week, and I'm also interested in throwing into the Infinite Unlimited some exploration of Shonen Jump or in the case of this week, Global Comics. Global Comics has been making available for its gold members, which I am, a lot of titles from other publishers, and it's worth checking out if you have not checked out Global Comics, the app, the platform, which also is selling day and date new Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and other titles in a way that right now only them and Neon Ichiban are providing an alternative to Amazon, which is what we're all looking for, right? But Global Comics is providing, as part of its gold membership, almost updated. I think it's back 2 or 3 months. A series like Void Rivals, which is the Image Comics series by Robert Kirkman with art by Lorenzo De Felici and Patricio Del Peche. But Void Rivals, I was catching up with it because as a birthday gift, my brother got me a toy, which is something as a 45-year-old I don't receive often, but it is pretty cool. It is a Transformers Void Rival Jetfire Transformers action figure. As a kid, I did not have any Transformers. I would look enviously at my little kid friends who had them, and we could not afford Transformers. But now as grown adults, my brother gave me a Void Rivals set that includes the two main characters, Solila and Derek of this series Void Rivals. And so I caught up on reading it on Global Comics. I gotta say though, Global Comics, pretty cool platform. Definitely think you should check it out. Also, weirdly, has issues 19, 20, and 22 and 23 of Void Rivals. So what happened to issue 21? I don't know. But you can also read issue 21 in Global Comics if you look for the trade, because volume 3 of the trade is also in Global Comics. And that volume 3 of the trade includes issue 21. No, is that right? Nope, I'm wrong. Sorry. It does not include issue 21. What I should have said is that it Global Comics has issues 13 and 14, and I don't know, somewhere in there it's missing one. 13, 14, 15 maybe is missing, or 16 is missing, but that one you can read in volume 3 of the trade, which is in Global Comics for free for gold members. Um, but it doesn't have issue 21, and so I stopped reading because I knew that it was gonna give me this random gap. So I'll wait until the trade of volume 4, which is out in stores now. Um, I'll wait until that trade is up in Global Comics so I can read ahead, uh, behind whatever when it is that you call what we do here, and make sure I'm not missing issue 21, which is mysteriously absent from Global Comics. So if you're listening, Global Comics, what's going on? Like your platform, you're missing some issues, weirdly. All right. So that's it. I have no idea if Infinite, Unlimited, or Comic Syllabus is back or if it's not really back. This is just a bit of a mic check to see if all this stuff is still working for the day, one day when teaching is not so consuming that there's no possible way that I could think of doing this. But since I got to this week, here I am. Hello to all those out there, and thank you for reading. Let's keep reading.